Okay, so Kirk, want to welcome you back. I'm trying to make Kirk a panelist. It's not allowing me for some. There we go. Okay. Welcome, Kirk. Welcome back, buddy. Waiting for you to unmute.
Unmute.
There you are. Look at your black lab.
Yep.
Is that yours?
I'm rearranging my office right now, so I don't have a camera set up.
Okay. Do you are you using a laptop? You want to show any charts or anything?
Well, I do, so I will share my screen.
Okay.
I think that just worked.
Yeah, peak oil plateau.
There you go.
Wow. Will fall by 2030. Okay. So let's talk about this. So is that EV? Oil demand will fall because we're all going to be driving electric vehicles.
We're going to see oil demand fall for these two key reasons. There are many key reasons why the oil demand will fall, but ultimately the oil price will fall. The EVs, if you take a look at all the mandates around the world, you have 18 governments now, major governments, not little countries, but big countries that are on the pathway to eliminating ICE vehicle sales anywhere from 2025 to 2035. I think in the United States, it'll probably be 2035. But Europe just got very aggressive over the summer. You're already seeing it from China and India. And that's on top of the incredible efficiency that we're seeing with EVs. But it's not just the EVs, although that's the one that gets headlines. The utility systems outside of India and China are already bringing down their fossil fuel use, in particular coal, but also oil. And you're starting to see petrochemicals get substitutes for feedstocks. And I think that is going to be something that almost nobody sees coming.
Okay, so explain that. There's oil in current feedstocks?
Right, you know, plastics, petroleum, petrochemicals.
Okay.
The carbon.
I don't know. I thought of agriculture when I heard feedstocks.
Yes.
But
okay. Right.
Okay,
so,
and that's not what you mean, right?
No. But agriculture is part of that game, actually.
Okay.
There's companies out there now that can pull the carbon, the methane and the CO2 out of dairy farms and water treatment plants,
right?
Power plants, and they can turn that into plastics.
Energy. And also energy. I think they have a lot of these farms, chicken farms and everything. They produce all this waste that kicks out methane, and there are I forgot what they're called, but it's almost like a big cauldron that converts this stuff to energy. If you could have storage, that you could convert the waste into energy. Right. Have you heard of those things? Huh?
Yeah, there's a company in California that I'm invested in called Aemitas, AEMITAS, and they have a big jump on carbon capture and sequestration and renewable energies in California, a big first mover advantage. And what they're doing is, the simplistic way of putting it is what you just did. They get a big pile of poop and they turn it into energy, and they can farm it off to other companies. There's a private company in California that can turn it into plastic.
Okay. Yeah, or even sell back the energy to utilities. Yeah, this is the new wave. Do you think there's going to be a lot of, well, first of all, Kirk, do you think we're going to get an infrastructure bill to support some of the things that you're saying here? Would things like this be included in the 1.7 trillion, or is it more about the other one, which is, I believe, more about social infrastructure?
Right.
What do you see coming in that first bipartisan bill that is going to support your narrative?
Well, so here's the problem with the current legislation. It's a little bit light on the clean energy stuff as far as I think it should go. but it's more than we've ever done. And presuming that Joe Manchin doesn't hold up the bills, because there's actually another short idea there. But presuming these bills get done roughly as we've heard about them, the movement towards clean energy will actually come through the regulatory process, not so much through taxation. And, it is accelerating. Is it accelerating as much as the Super Bowls on clean energy want it to? No. Is it, is oil going to all of a sudden be the fuel that we use until 2050? No. There's always that in-between thing. And I think these bills are in between. And I'm not positive that they get passed in a way that is going to supercharge any of this, because Manchin is very pro, fossil fuel. So we'll see. But it is a step in that direction, but it's not the supercharge event that people on the left want it to be.
Okay. What do you have for us after this slide?
So
is this it?
Yeah, I kind of go through the history of this in the presentation, and I have this available. I should edit it one more time, but I have a whole presentation available. These are things that I said way back in 2014.
Okay.
And a lot of these things have happened. In the parentheses, I put some of the changes. I was at CES a year and a half ago, and it became apparent to me that hydrogen was going to have a role in energy storage and heavy duty vehicles. The demographically based slow growth forever thesis that you're starting to hear play out in the news again about growth slowing down from the rebound. All these things are happening. And I think that for the oil trader, I really actually think that the price of oil is going to be relatively range bound for several years. And the thing that you're going to see happen is eventually the markets and the governments, and I think the government's already realized, and I think OPEC already realizes that the oil age is, into that second or third inning of the end of the oil age. And as they get to the middle innings of the end of the oil age, countries that rely on oil production are going to produce more oil, right? Because they need to get it to market. So that's going to create an event for U.S. oil companies that is not going to be very positive. You're going to eventually get that last wave of oil company bankruptcies. And I think that there's a trade coming 3, 4, 5 years out, right? But shorter term, as you're showing on your chart there, you could get, a wavy period in oil. I don't know if you see, that 45, 42, 50 price in the short term, but you could, because the economy is just not growing as fast as people want it to, right? We saw this rebound, and the rebound is kind of tailing off. And a lot of the hopium on oil was based on the rebound being very, very sustainable.
Okay, so you have a take on the overall market, Kirk? I mean, 45.40 it's has been the recent high. Do you think this market is set up for any kind of disappointment? I mean, these are the only kind of breaks we get, very orderly. Do you have a line in the sand for where you wouldn't want to have stock exposure?
So I have been cutting back on my S&P 500 exposure forever. And I've been getting involved with some of the meme stocks, some of the cryptocurrencies. Shooter, your buddy, has been helping me out there. Yeah. And I think that the S&P 500, there's a very important stat to remember. 70% of the cash, 75%, right in there, of the cash on corporate American balance sheets are on the NASDAQ 100 companies, which are all, in the S&P 500. So you essentially have 100 companies that have 3/4 of the cash, and the other 400 companies, the last quarter of the cash. So what does that say about a quarter of the companies on the S&P 500? They're relatively junk companies, a lot of zombies. And I think that you can selectively short the heck out of the no growth companies on the S&P 500 because most of them don't have good balance sheets to boot. So you've got 100 to 200 stocks on the S&P 500 that I think, are just really easy shorts. And I'll show you my S&P 500 chart in a second here. I'll pull it up for you.
Okay, you have to take the screen. I'm going to stop sharing, and because
I
was showing some things.
So I have a pretty big. Here you go. So this is my S&P 500 chart.
Okay.
And I've talked for a long time about how that period, 2015-16, that flat 2-year period, choppy 2-year period, was kind of the baseline for the market.
Mm-hmm.
And because of low interest rates and QE, the channel for the stock market has risen to this green one. It should be down here, but it's not. And if interest rates are low forever, maybe then the higher channel is permanent, right? But I point this out to millennials, and I say, look, with the exception of dividends, 2% coupon, there is a very long period here, about 13 years before the S&P 500 broke out again, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the next decade could be a lot like that. So I think there's a little bit of cigar puff left. I don't know that we really get up to 500 here in the short term, but I think you can see a zigzag motion filling out here for the decade. And my big thesis for the 2020s is that the bifurcation in the quality of the S&P 500 is going to keep that index bouncing around. And each time it'll set a little higher high, just because that's the headline and we have to have it. But I think that you're going to see a pretty choppy period. I think that the S&P 500 could get down to around 350. I think it's close to its top point. But I think that the Reddit army, the apes, the retards, that's what they call themselves, are probably right. And I think, the money printer goes burr at some point. So, wherever we end in here, we come down to around here. And if there's an Armageddon scenario, it could go lower. I just think you see something along these lines over the next decade. And it's going to be driven by those zombie companies eventually getting killed. And there's going to be a lot of them getting killed in the middle of the decade because the Federal Reserve facilitated their debt get extended. So when their debt is really due, and it was going to be due in 2020, 21, 22, now it's due in 24, 25, 26. The correction that I expected last year, even before coronavirus, I think was going to happen either way. And now we've just pulled the timeline back 4, 5, 6 years by refinancing everybody's corporate debt. But the whole slow growth forever thesis that I've been talking about in Market Watch since 2012 is, look, demographics dictate the pace of the economy, and we just aren't going to see a lot of growth. That's one of the things I mentioned with the oil. There just isn't a lot of growth. There's a lot of refurbishing of the economy, but the post-World War II and then baby boomer driven growth periods, and then the emerging market, particularly China, getting people into the middle class, those things are all gone. So the only way to have a lot of growth is rebuild the world and make it sustainable. Maybe that's just the excuse. Maybe none of the clean energy and climate change stuff is real. I don't believe that, but even if it weren't, the governments need a way to create growth. And maybe that's what they're using. Who knows?
Okay. Do you think that the government and this current administration is going to upset the apple cart in big tech with antitrust regulations, etc.? Is that an overhang for the best performing group as of late, the FANG and MAGA stocks?
I think you're going to get a rerun of what we had, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years ago, when they got called to Congress. You know, everybody got their sound bites and got their PR moment, but
nothing
you know,
happens.
this would be slap on the wrist.
Okay.
You know, maybe Instagram has to get spun out of Facebook. So what?
Okay. How about what China's doing? The draconian measures they're taking with tech stocks. You know, after 2008, they were not as weak as the rest of the world. They didn't suffer from the Great Recession as much as we did, and they were actually were attributed as the engine of growth that helped, besides central banks, help pull us out of it. Do you think they could, the Chinese could, which are having some difficulties, almost self-inflicted, that they could drag us down?
So I've got a lot to say about China. So we would probably need an afternoon and do a long form. But
Okay.
I think that, well, let's put it this way. For 2 years, I've been telling people to sell their commie stocks. And the reason I say it is because I've always thought that Xi was untrustworthy when it came to protections of your property rights and your capital. And this decline in the emerging markets, internet and e-commerce ETF from here to here was part a blow off, but it was mainly the Chinese stocks. And we've gotten a rally, and weirdly it hit right on my 618 line, because that never happens. And probably come back down here again. And then the question is does it head all the way down here? I think that China is at risk of decelerating their entire economy because I think that they overestimate their power
to control everything.
I just don't think that they realize that not everybody's going to cooperate. You know, so the whole export-driven economy is going to be difficult for them to transition away from. And I think that they don't have the technology on the semiconductor side. I think that Taiwan is the biggest flashpoint potentially on the planet. I think that the Chinese situation is dangerous. I have things that I've been writing a novel about that have to do with how coronavirus really happened. So, you know, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about the Chinese government. And I think that, like people all over the world, propaganda works. We see it in this country, we see it in Europe, we see it everywhere. Propaganda has worked for a long time. And from a psychological standpoint, will continue to work because we like to blame things on foreigners. And it doesn't matter if we're American or Chinese or European, we like to blame it on the foreigners. So I am afraid of the economic impacts that China could have on the rest of the world if they decelerate and destabilize.
Okay. I know you also keep an eye on another region. We used to talk about Iran a lot, and they have a new president, and Israel has a new prime minister, and the U.S. has a new president. What kind of mix do you expect? Anything? What do you expect out of the region now, especially with Iran and what's happened with our withdrawal from Afghanistan? It, you know, kind of reminded me of when the Soviet Union pulled out, and it wasn't much longer after that before they had major problems and dissolved. What's your feel on what's happening out there?
So about 15 or 16 years ago, it started to become apparent to me that the reason we got rid of Saddam Hussein was so that there was no longer a buffer between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that they would have to deal with each other. And that facilitated arms deals for us under multiple presidents. And now what you're seeing, and I've long thought there'd be a war there by now, more than the typical war, the proxy wars. I thought there'd be a bigger blow up. And what became apparent to me during the Trump administration, and maybe this would have been the same under a Hillary administration, I don't know. But I don't think there's a lot of stomach for fighting in the Middle East anymore.
Yeah.
I think pulling out of Afghanistan was part of that.
Right.
And it's because we don't really need them anymore, right? Our imports of OPEC oil are way, way down. And I think that we are leaving that part of the world to itself to settle itself out. I think that the great powers, and maybe China's going to take a shot, but I think that the great powers realize that these are fires that outsiders can't put out, and maybe even the people who live there can't put out. So a lot of it revolved around oil for decades and decades. And now that we're at the end of the oil age, or starting the end of the oil age, second inning, whatever it is, I think you're going to see more and more of the U.S. pulling out of the region. And I say that with a sister-in-law that's in Iraq right now, on the Syrian border. I believe that you're going to see an attempt made by Iran to integrate into the world, because their view on converting everybody to Islam is that they can do it without having to do it forcibly, right? That we'll all just adopt it. And, I don't think that's true, but I think that you're going to get a nuclear deal. I think that you're going to see more and more pressure on the major countries in the region to support the region. I think pulling out of Afghanistan is part of putting pressure on Iran, because now they have to deal with that on their border. There's been a concerted effort since 9/11, and I'm writing about this right now. One of the things, and if you haven't watched the Apple special on it, it's worth taking a free trial to Apple TV to watch this special on 9/11, is since 9/11, the United States made the concerted effort to start using less oil from the region and to go and kick some ass and then proceed to withdraw, which is what you're seeing right now.
Okay.
So we have fewer troops in the Middle East. I think pulling out of Afghanistan was later than it should have been. But I think it all is part of a long game that people like Dick Cheney believed in. And we are seeing the end of the long game of the United States in the Middle East right now. And that might cause instability. It might not, probably will. And if you get that war, that'll be your spike in the price of oil. If not, now you have China in the region. Iran and Saudi Arabia have to deal with each other. Iraq is the rope in the middle of the tug of war game. Syria and Afghanistan are, I think Trump probably described those relatively appropriately because they've been bombed into oblivion.
Okay, Kirk.
I think that you're going to see a lot of change there, and it might not be for the good.
Okay, so we should probably keep an eye on the flashpoint in the South China Sea and Taiwan. I guess there's major military exercises there the middle of the month. I think that we place a lot of subs there, and we're doing joint exercises with Taiwan, and because of that, China's doing something prior. So you think that's the new flashpoint in the world? It's not new, but the one to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think the Middle East is part of the game there as well. It's part of soaking up resources from our enemies. But I think Taiwan is the one place where if Xi oversteps, that is the one place where I could see a conflict that evolves past a proxy war. And there's not a lot of places on the planet where you can say, yeah, you know, our guys will mess around with their guys, but pretty much we leave each other alone. I think Taiwan is a place where
There are no
I think
proxies for Taiwan.
there are not, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's either they land on the beach or they don't.
yeah.
And it's
Well, usually it's isn't it first terrible financial conditions before something like that happens, and isn't kind of what we're seeing in China is that they have half the above ground food stock, grain stock. They're preparing for some type of famine. Um, just China's the one to look for, and uh, Biden's kind of a hawk when it comes to China and Russia. So everyone thinks he elected Democrat, and they're going to be for peace, but he's kind of a hawk. Where's the best place for people to follow your writings? You're a great thinker, Kirk. I always like listening to you every time you've been on here, and I know you do a lot of writing. You're
right.
prolific with your thoughts, and you're a long-term thinker. So here, fundamental trends is
Fundamental
Kirk's
trends.
one. Okay.
And I have a free library card here, so you can get all the
Oh,
macro and reports, and usually about a piece per week. And then also over at Seeking Alpha, hey, one thing I will tell you about Taiwan, because you brought up that Biden is potentially a hawk. I did not like President Trump, and I think everybody who listens to me knows that. However, I'm not in love with Joe Biden either. And in fact,
I know what you
I
mean.
just you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I put that out there just so people don't think I'm super far in either direction. I'm a centrist. I've always said if you can't reach the middle, you probably aren't helping. I think that ultimately, unless there's mistakes made, I think China's going to end up getting some sort of a deal on Taiwan, maybe extending um, the current arrangement. I don't think the United States ultimately has a reason to protect Taiwan. I think we have a reason to threaten to and make sure
Yeah.
that China doesn't go in there and completely turn it over. So take it over. So I think there will be a deal at some point. And I think the thing that you can watch to really understand that is
Is Hong
Intel.
Kong what they did
No,
with Hong
Intel
Kong?
and no. I mean, Hong Kong is attached to China, so you always
Yeah.
knew they were going in there. Taiwan's out
Okay.
in the water. It's an island, right?
Yeah.
But you can tell that we are um,
We're selling
preparing,
them
just like,
arms.
but and that's fine. We can sell them weapons. We make money on that, and they can, it's part of the negotiation, right? Try to negotiate from strength. Just like we started using our own oil with fracking to extract ourselves from the Middle East as we transitioned away from oil altogether. Our semiconductor industry is moving back home. And Intel is throwing $130 billion into developing a European and American fab system and supply chains. Taiwan Semiconductor is building in Arizona.
Right.
Why do you think those things are happening?
Yeah.
It's because we know that the capacity in Taiwan is probably going to go to China at some point.
Got it.
So
Oh,
you negotiate that and you say, okay, how do we avoid a war in Taiwan? And then we both get our semiconductors, because semiconductors are like oil was, right?
right.
Oil was the most
Yeah.
important thing in the world until recently. And now semiconductors are the most important thing in the world. And who knows what's going to be the most important thing in 20 or 30 years. But that's what I see coming with Taiwan. I think that mistakes when you're
I
operating at that
disagree.
high level that happen, though.
I think your black lab is the most important thing in the world to you.
Yeah, she's 14 in November.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay.
That picture up there is I took her to New York, to Times Square, and I let her off the leash. And she didn't go nowhere. She just sat down and looked around.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you, Kirk. And I do encourage people that are listening to us live or watch a video later to just go and check out Kirk's readings and some of his content. And if you like long-term thinking with potentially some short-term ideas, here's where you go. So thank you, my trading warrior brother, for
Yeah, thanks a
hanging
lot,
out
Dale.
with
I'd
us
love to
today.
get you on my program here real soon. I know we've been talking about it.
Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it, buddy.
All right, you take care.
All right, so that's a wrap. Anthony saying thank you, and we enjoyed it. And everyone have a good day. Good hunting. Be careful. I think ECB tomorrow, and we'll see everyone for that event. Remember, don't just count your pips, count your blessings, and you can join the team in 14 minutes for the morning edge. Adios. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you.